Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zachary Jerome. Oh, excuse me.
Are you?
Oh, sorry. It's in my notes.
Oh man.
What's up, dog?
How's it going? What is up? Not much, man. I'm ready for a new episode.
You know what I'm ready for right now?
No, what?
My lazy boy.
Nice lazy boy.
This feels so good.
You haven't stopped talking about it.
I cannot tell you how much I love this.
You've been sitting in that for 45 minutes, and that is literally all you've been talking about.
It just fits me perfectly. So go to the YouTube page, check it out, rate, review, subscribe, thumbs up, smash that like button.
And they're rating and reviewing the chair, right? Not the show.
I tell you what, I believe so much in this chair that I am happy to get reviews on the new chair. And by new, I mean from, I think, 1986.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It feels really good right now.
It fits you. It suits you.
Plus, I get to rock back and forth, which I'm sure will not be annoying.
No, not at all. I can't wait to edit this. It'll be great.
You're going to put the motion stabilizer in there or whatever.
Oh, boy. I'm excited because I don't know a gosh darned thing about whatever it is you're talking about.
You don't. And this one came across the old crackpot desk years ago, actually. And I first heard about it watching Ancient Aliens.
Nice.
LOL. I can't believe, I can't believe I used to watch that show. Also, can't believe I'm not watching it now because it is actually pretty good.
It's good for what it is, you know?
Could it be Star People?
Yes.
That's basically the gist of it, in case you haven't seen an episode. So, this one came across the old crackpot desk a few years ago, and also, got to say, shout out to listener Graciela, because she also, I believe, recommended this in a voice memo, again, years ago. And, folks, we take our time.
Sometimes we do.
And so therefore it's been baking in the oven for a couple of years, and now here it is, ready to be served, piping hot.
Love it.
So
and what's it called?
What we are talking about today, we're talking about the Nazca Lines. Nazca, Nazca Lines, Lines.
I just don't know anything about this.
That's okay. You will, by the end of the show,
oh sweet,
understand it. Know the predominant theories around what they are and why and how.
Okay.
And pretty much just know like the theories around the what, the high, and the wow as wow and the how, as well as what they are. So buckle up, dude. But this has to be like one of my favorite genres of all in the conspiracy theory space because, it's like it's old, it's weird, and we don't get it.
Yeah, that's perfect. It is our wheelhouse.
It is. And it's also just like interesting from a broader historical perspective.
Yeah.
And I love history.
Yes, you do.
Between the two of us, there's only one history major. And yet, you know what? I had 3/4 of a history minor complete. So I basically have a PhD. Honorary PhD in history.
I think we can work that out.
Thank you very much. Anyways, this is real. So this isn't one of those things where it's like, are you looking at something and could it possibly be, I don't know, man-made or earth-made?
An underwater pyramid.
Yeah, dude. Like, these are actually real. There's no debate about that.
Okay.
And in fact, when you look at the pictures later, you'll be like, yeah, that's obviously real. But it's interesting because it's like, it's been, there's just different theories about like what the story is. And so I'm excited, obviously, because today I get to take you, dear Timothy Nigel, on a journey across land, sea, and time.
Wow.
I get to take the listeners on a journey across land, sea, and time.
Not air.
Depends on where you're living, I suppose.
Okay.
So potentially air.
Okay.
But definitely land, sea, and time. Thank you very much. And to be way more, technical about it all, because, folks, we got to get bogged down in the details for a minute here. We're going 450 kilometers, or approximately 275 miles south of Lima, Peru.
Okay.
And what is there is weird, but it's cool. And they are large, imprinted patterns in the ground. And the imprints that I'm talking about really fall into basically two categories. One are, I guess, I don't know, animals,
Okay.
Like very distinctly drawn animals.
Sure.
The other category happens to be like geometric shapes.
Oh, wild.
So just like, examples of the animals include a hummingbird, spider, fish, condor, heron, monkey, lizard, dog, cat, and maybe a human.
What?
Maybe a human. We'll see.
Oh.
Other shapes also include trees and flowers. And okay, that's kind of weird by itself. But what makes them more weird is the fact that these geoglyph designs measure between 400 and 1,100 meters across.
That's huge.
Massive.
How many are there?
To date, there's, I think, just less than like 200.
Oh, my Lord. So they're like still finding them and stuff.
They're still finding them through the use of lasers and, radar technology.
Lasers in the jungle.
Sonar, who knows?
Wow.
And by the way, not in the jungle. In the desert.
In the desert?
Yeah, dude.
Oh, man. I was trying to make a Paul Simon joke, but okay. So what?
Yeah. These massive designs. So if you're standing on the ground, they look like literal paths because it's just like to kind of create a picture for yourself. And by the way, folks, go over to the Instagram page, check it out, follow us, rate, review, subscribe, smash that like button. And actually what you'll see is like, again, when you're standing there, they look like they could almost be roadways because they typically, from a width standpoint, I'll get to the exact dimensions later, but like, it's kind of like a 2-lane road essentially wide.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And really all they did was the people that did this just scraped off the top couple inches of dirt. So not even really a technically difficult thing to do, which is why there's no mystery like, okay.
How did they do it?
Yeah.
Well, they
just, took essentially shovels or something and kind of cleared the path.
Right.
And because it's a desert, it's not raining, it's not snowing, presumably. Like it's just everything's been perfectly preserved, baking in the sun.
Why? What?
Yeah. So to kind of get back to the immensity of everything, the combined length of all the lines that have been discovered is over 1,300 kilometers. That's 800 miles.
Thank you. Wow.
And the group in total covers about 50 square kilometers, which is about 19 square miles. And they typically, each line, like I said, typically goes about 4 to 6 inches deep, so 10 to 15 centimeters. So really not that much. Like I said, they just kind of scraped off the top layer of loose gravel.
Wow.
And that's how they were able to make these designs in the sand.
And there's like 200 of them.
Correct.
And are they all generally in the same area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in this very specific location in the desert. And, of course, as you learned in our Kensington Runestone episode, you cannot
carbon date a rock.
Thank you. So you were maybe asking, how could they carbon date? How do they know how old this stuff is?
Yeah, how old it is.
Well, so first of all, I'll say that they believe these to be... at this point now, about 2,500 years old. So they know that many of these structures or these designs were made between the year 500 BCE and 500 CE. So about the span of about 1,000 years, they were able to carbon date other artifacts, relics, and such from the location, as well as some sticks in the ground and that kind of a thing. So they know for certain, the time period in which it was made. But what is, I think, to the casual observer, hard to figure out is like, how do you make something so massive and make it look perfect?
Yeah.
When you can't see what you're doing really from the ground.
They weren't sending up airplanes or hot air balloons or getting satellite imagery. Like what?
Yeah.
I have so many questions.
And on top of that, the other question is, well, if you can't see it from the ground, why would you make it anyways?
Huh?
So
exactly.
Okay. Seems like it's a pretty ripe topic for the old crackpot crew.
What?
Yeah. So anyways, what we'll have to do first here, I think, Tim, to get the ball rolling here, I'll just show you a few shots of these images and just take a quick look, share with the listeners what you're seeing here, okay?
Okay. So I'm seeing what is that? Like a monkey or something? Oh, my God. Yeah. These are obviously like aerial photographs. It's like an ant. Like these things are massive.
That ant is so cool.
And they're just in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm providing absolutely no insight for anyone who is not also looking at exactly what I'm looking at. But guys, this is so weird. Look at that Thunderbird.
That
wow.
is sick. That is the, not heron, that's the condor.
Oh, sure.
There's even a hummingbird one that's totally bad.
Oh, my God. I could look at this all day. That monkey, too.
I know, dude.
What? I mean, it's like, is there some ceremonial purpose for this? Is it, I'm not quite ready to go where you want me to go, but like, I'm trying to think of the logical terrestrial, explanations for this. And it's like, what's the purpose? Like 1? Sure. Maybe 200. What's going on?
Yeah, dude. The other thing, too, is like, it always surprises me, to date, like whenever as we continue to do the show, it's like you find out about this stuff and you're like, I can't believe humans did that.
Yeah.
And it's there. It exists today. And it's like, why aren't we just talking about this all the time?
Yeah.
Because
even something as mundane as the pyramids in Egypt. It's like, what is going on?
No, that is true. That is.
And I mean, it's not mundane, but it's like everyone's heard of it,
Yeah. And these are, there are so many more places like this in the world too, where it's just bizarre. The Karnak stones that we've already covered, for instance. Yeah. Underwater Stonehenge, like all that stuff. It's just like crazy. So anyways, all right. So as I've said, the Nazca Lines, they're geoglyphs made in the soil of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. And because, like I said earlier, it's a desert, the dry, the windless, stable climate of the plateau, the lines themselves have basically been preserved naturally. And like what I would say is that even though they're made from or most visible from the sky, when you're looking at them from the ground, they just look like long lines, long rows, and it is just bonkers. And so the longest one happens to be about 400 yards long, which is 4 football fields.
Thank you.
American football fields.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
But they were first discovered, or at least like written about, believe it or not, back in 1553 by the Spanish conquistador Pedro Cieza de Leon. And he wrote about them actually believing them to be trail markers. So he was on the ground like, oh, clearly these are just old roads or some sort of trail markers to guide us to the ocean. These are not that far from the ocean. So the thought was perhaps it could serve as some sort of compass or something for folks on the ground. Sure. So they were documented again in 1569 by explorer Luis Monzon, who reported having seen ancient ruins in Peru, including the remains of roads. So, it's like we have observed these for several hundred years, but it actually wasn't until the early part of the 20th century, with the dawn of aviation, that people actually really started to pay attention to these. So I'll say you can see these from the hillside and the mountains around them, but you cannot really fully take in the immensity of these things or the intricacy of the design. So they were really, as far as we can tell, not made to actually be viewed from the ground. Like if you're there, they look like roads, as I said, or the early explorers assumed that. And even from the hillside, it's like you could probably catch a few glimpses of like what the broader design is. Sure. But in general, these are not to be enjoyed from the ground. It was the Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Giuseppe who became the first academic to actually study them. And he was a Peruvian archaeologist. But it was actually Paul Kosick, who was an American historian from Long Island University in New York, who's credited as the actual first like academic Western scholar, whatever you want to call it, to study those lines in depth. So he went to Peru in roughly 1940, 1941. His intent was actually to study the ancient irrigation systems, and he flew over the lines and realized that one was in the shape of a bird. And then another chance observation helped him to see how the lines converged on the horizon at the winter solstice.
No.
Oh, boy. Enter conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat here. Am I right? And then he teamed up with another archaeologist, Richard P. Schadel, and a German woman, Maria Reich, and they found that there were two major phases of these Nazca Lines. So once they set in to study them, that's when they figured out, okay, there was one set of lines from the Paracas phase, and that seems to be about 400 to 200 BCE, and then another distinctly different set of, designs from about 200 BCE, about 200 BCE to 500 CE. And so they theorized that the figures were designed as astronomical markers on the horizon to show where the sun and other celestial bodies rose on significant dates.
Okay, I like that.
So you can kind of think of it like, are we settled on Stonehenge being basically some sort of calendar?
Yeah, until one of us does an episode on it, that's kind of where my head's at, yeah.
Seems like it, right? Or ritualistic purposes.
Exactly,
so
yeah.
I think, the prevailing theories from the academics as they first were getting their hands on this stuff and looking at it was, okay, probably some sort of giant map, maybe markers somehow.
Yeah.
Seem to be related probably to some sort of rituals or traditions, most likely. At least those would be the most logical
Yeah, I like
assumptions.
it. It's kind of like constellations, but on Earth.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like a sundial star map kind of thing, basically.
Yeah, and so that's actually interesting to say that because you're right. Humans for millennia have basically looked at the stars and tried to figure out, everybody sees a different design. And perhaps, maybe that's just as good as any. These could be literal constellations, right? Reflecting back to the actual stars. Like I said, so now it's been almost about 100 years since they were really kind of starting to look at this stuff. And even in, the time since they first discovered these, they've found between 80 and 100 new figures through the use of drones, and then of course lasers on sea bass or whatever. So that's actually just very interesting. So I wouldn't be surprised too if the total count over the years continues to go up because they actually have better ways to peer into the Earth soil, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, one of the first things that comes up is okay, well, how'd they make it?
Yeah.
And this,
even if they're just shoveling, dirt, it's still a lot of dirt to move. Or sand, or what is it, sand, gravel?
It's basically sand and gravel.
Okay.
So really, if I'm going to be absolutely technical about it, here's what they did, or here's what they look like. So they were made by removing the top layer of the reddish brown iron oxide coated pebbles to reveal a yellow-gray subsoil. So, they basically just, the dimensions are such that it's basically not more than a foot going down, or I don't even know what that is in the metric system, but it's really just kind of removing that top layer of oxidized, pebbles to then reveal the lightish, sand underneath.
Huh.
And so, like I said, not really any mysteries around how they were done, except for the fact that you have these very intricate designs that pass over hundreds of yards, right? Yeah. And so then it's well, what'd they do? The prevailing theory there amongst archaeologists is pretty straightforward, which is basically they made a small design to scale and then, sketched it out in the earth and said, okay, Maria Reich had thought they had done a 6 foot by 6 foot map, if you will.
Yeah.
And then plotted out the significant points where they'd have to turn or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they basically paced it out, put sticks in the ground, and then made, these lines that way.
Okay.
Reminds me somewhat or quite a lot of crop circles.
Kind of does. Yeah.
And I would say, so I think just, generally speaking, of course, could it be done by people back then? Yeah, it totally could be done. And even just, the fact that, okay, of course, these things scale, large surfaces or large areas, that by itself isn't really that hard to figure out.
So I don't want to get too far ahead or steal your thunder if it's coming up, but do people feel different energy waves or vibrations or anything in this area that they don't feel in other places?
That's a very good question. And you're not jumping ahead too far. You're not spoiling anything. And I would say the short answer to that is depends on who you ask.
Of course.
Which is exactly what's next, right? But if I recall, going back to the crop circle episode, you talked about, I think, I don't know if it's radiation, but certainly some electromagnetic
Yeah, there were
abnormalities.
definitely electromagnetic events or interference that would happen in certain locations. Not everyone, because a lot, if not most, were and are hoaxes. But the quote-unquote real crop circles, weird things happen.
Yeah.
And those who are, take this with a grain of salt because it's 100% woo, but it's like those who are in tune with that, they say, yeah, I feel different vibrations when I'm in these crop circles or whatever.
Yeah. Not a lot of that came up, and there wasn't anything either around artesian wells underneath or that kind of stuff. But it was, it's certainly, like I said, depending on who you ask, up for debate to some degree, but it doesn't seem to be anything that's been really super scientifically studied.
Sure.
So we got to talk about the theories around the how and the why.
Okay. I thought we had that covered. So or at least the how, maybe.
Like I said, scholars, in air quotes, disagree.
Sure.
So let's bring in our first academic, if you will. Academic in air quotes once again here.
Yeah.
You remember my main man, Erich von Danaken.
How could I forget? Mr. Ancient Aliens himself. Chariots of the Gods.
Yes, that's right. So he actually probably to some degree popularized these, at least in more the mainstream, if you can call Ancient Alien stuff mainstream, because he wrote about these back in 1968. That's when he published Chariots of the Gods. We did an episode on that maybe 2 years ago or so now.
Yeah. Wow. That long ago.
Yeah, it was 2020. So
okay.
Mathematically, it's very close to checking out.
I'll take your word for it.
So he wrote the book, Chariots of the Gods. To make a long story short, the gist of the book is as follows. What's with all these ancient structures? And man could not have possibly created these. Therefore, the only logical explanation is...
aliens.
Bingo.
Yep.
So what he said, and he argued this as a pretty matter-of-fact situation. He said, look, people could not see these lines from the ground. You could only see them from the air.
He's not wrong.
Therefore, why would anybody make these?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the logical answer here is simply that it's to make people, creatures, beings from above see those designs.
Yeah.
And one theory that he has is basically that it's to please them. Another theory is that, well, maybe this is a map to the quote-unquote gods to say, here is where you land.
Yes. Okay.
So this is where we got to take a sidestep into the disbelief, if you will, suspending belief.
Okay.
So what he said, and I'm going to be quoting some things here, he said, he sees, if you look at these figures, antenna beings with hats and feelers, presumably astronauts.
Okay.
And in fact, he drew upon some unverified discoveries of skeletons and pottery that dates back to more than 100,000 years.
What?
100,000 years. One more time for effect, 100,000 years. And he was saying that some of the artwork in the area depicts a person holding a telescope.
Okay.
So he believes that that person-looking thing is basically an ancient astronaut holding a telescope.
Okay.
And he said, and I'm quoting here, well, okay, first I'll say, he said, in looking back at some of the artwork in the area, comparing it with the Nazca Lines, he said, and I'm quoting here, facial forms almost unknown on Earth. That's what he sees.
Almost unknown.
Unfortunately, nobody on this planet has seen these exact same artifacts that he's referring to, except for one amateur archaeologist who long since died and said that the artifacts have also been lost to time.
Okay, so if you take the artifacts out of the equation, the 100,000-year-old pottery and bone shards, sure thing, Mr. Von Danaken.
Oh, we can't just leave it there. This is Erich von Danaken.
But anyway, so if you leave those out and you just go based on what he's saying, these are to please the celestial beings, it's well, I mean, maybe, right?
I
don't know.
So he took it a step further.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
To add a little credibility, if you will. Mm-hmm. And he went back to looking at some ancient Sanskrit literature, which describes 3 towns in the heavens from which aircraft called Vimanas landed on Earth. And he theorized that they landed at Nazca in search of minerals, creating a trapezoidal indentation in the ground, and that local people watched in amazement as human-like beings with golden shimmering skins, air quotes, walked around, mined for metal, then flew away in their heavenly chariot. And then he said that the ancient astronauts soon returned, built landing aids, and then eventually left forever. The awestruck natives revered the Nazcas as a place of pilgrimage, and that generations of pilgrims built figures and runways as a sign for the gods to return. But alas, they never did. Or did they?
They did not.
And beside the fact that, just setting aside everything where it's actually horribly insulting to say that anybody that lived a long time ago that didn't happen to be white couldn't make something like this. Exactly. This is what he said, I think, for anybody who doubted them. He said, and I'm quoting, "What is wrong with the idea that these lines were laid out to say to the gods, 'Land here. Everything has been prepared as you ordered'?"
Sure. Or people just built them. I mean, you can still have the ancient alien things and have humans build these.
Well, maybe, that's kind of what he's saying, though, too, to be fair. So he's saying, they certainly landed, left some indentations, maybe made a little star map for themselves.
Okay.
And then because, the indigenous folks were so awestruck by the technology and everything else, maybe believing them to be gods, said, hey, let's build more to honor them and have them come back.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I can believe it.
That's his specific take on the Nazca Lines.
I mean, it is weird, man. It is so bizarre that you can only see these from space, from the air.
Yeah. A couple 100 feet up, certainly.
Minimally.
Right? Yeah.
And as far as I know, there's no way to do that, before 1900. So,
right.
Maybe.
Respectable theory.
Maybe.
Scientists disagree to this day. Okay. Let's go on to the next scholar here, if you will, Tim.
Okay.
And by scholar, I would say this person is really more of an amateur conspiracy theorist.
Love it.
Which is the most generous title I could give this person.
Are we amateur conspiracy theorists?
I
think we're professional at this point, actually. So.
Yeah. Actually, Matthew Keller said it best. He said that we don't spread conspiracy theories. We look into them. And
yes,
I think that's exactly right.
right.
Okay, so enter a gentleman by the name of Ryushin Sean Malone. Like I said, he's an amateur conspiracy theorist. And I'm not going to lie when I say this, and I mean this in the best possible way. If you watch his videos on YouTube or if you look at his website, he looks like he goes to the dry cleaners probably once a week with his tinfoil hat to have it, actually professionally cleaned.
Respect.
Mm-hmm. And he, of course, has his own theory on the Nazca Lines.
Good. I want to hear it.
So he studied the lines in totality using imaging from above, and he claims, this is interesting, if you plot all the significant points of the lines, they actually mimic the shape of the constellation Orion.
Yes. Perfect. I love this.
And in fact, what he found through his research was that if you look at the largest lines, 3 of the largest lines, they converge into 3 different hubs pointing towards the Orion constellation.
Oh, wow.
Okay. That's actually cool.
That's great.
I could believe that. I could buy that. And I think if somebody with a little bit more, credibility to their name attached to that said that, I'd be like, okay. Cool. They were obsessed with Orion, the constellation specifically. But what he believes is that this is a territorial marking by aliens. And not just any aliens, Tim.
Oh.
He believes, and he's written about this extensively. Go check out his site. Actually, don't check out his site. He believes the constellation Orion was laid out because it was placed there by an alien civilization called the Orion Group.
Oh. Okay, I have not come across them before.
Which I think is also a hedge fund group, if you will.
Thank you, yes.
Well, according to Mr. Ryushin Sean Malone, the Orion Group is, and I'm quoting here, a satanic group that takes over star systems throughout the galaxy, if not the universe. End quote. Why, you ask? Simple. Purpose for doing so is to warn other aliens that this planet is theirs.
Oh, no. We've been marked?
They're literally marking their territory.
So the Nazca Lines are alien satanic markings to warn other aliens not to mess with us.
Don't mess.
Oh, my God.
Now,
That's like the worst possible explanation I could think of.
It's a little doomsday-ish, I have to admit. But he goes a step further, obviously. And he's looked at a lot of these ancient structures, including the Great Pyramids, ley lines, essentially every structure that was built, say, pre-1000. And he asserts that every single one of those align. I'm not making this up. This is not exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. That they all point to and align with the Orion constellation.
No.
And that each one of those is simply a marking by the Orion Group saying, hey, this is our turf. Wow. And he even said, and this is super interesting, and I'm still trying to sort through what this all means. He believes that, for instance, the pyramids of Giza were actually ancient water wells to harvest water for their craft because they needed to power their craft when they came down to Earth to harvest adrenochrome from human adrenal glands.
Oh, no. Oh, wow.
Why?
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Why are you rolling your eyes? Well, I don't get it.
Man, I didn't think we'd bring Q into this. This is
a stone's throw. Yeah.
Up. Wow.
So I don't know, man.
Wow. Well, he had me to a point.
I was thinking about this too. I was like, I bet, technically speaking, if you're going to look at these structures, at some point during the year they'll align with Orion, depending on your orientation.
Right, exactly. But I mentioned it earlier in the show. I'm like, well, maybe these line up with some sort of stars. Maybe it's some sort of star map, whatever it was I said. And I'm like, all right, this guy knows what he's talking about. Let's hear him out. It's like, okay, well, that might even be a bit far for me.
That might be its own show by itself, like straight up.
Jeez, yeah. Have fun with that.
Okay, let's bring in a little bit more academic credibility here, if you will. Let's talk about explorer Jim Woodman. Now, this one actually happens to be my favorite because he's really not like asserting any alien intervention whatsoever. But what Jim Woodman does that I think is so beautiful is he was getting into the how it was constructed. How could you possibly make these lines if you didn't somehow have an aerial view?
Well, I mean, yeah, we established that kind of, but I like where he's going. Okay.
So he believed, so again, ancient alien stuff all aside, probably believing that these are most likely ritualistic types of things or, carvings or whatever you want to call them or structures. He believes that the Nazca created these by inventing, wait for it, the first hot air balloon.
Okay.
So he's resting his theory on the true fact that the Nazca people were quite skilled at weaving and textile work.
Wow.
And, he believed that they were able to craft essentially a giant blanket.
Yes.
Wrap it up like a hot air balloon, or wrap it like a balloon. Burn wood and other types of things in the area to inflate said balloon and go up, in a basket, essentially, and then somehow direct the construction of these things.
Yes. I love that.
And what I love even more about that was when critics obviously, laughed in his face, he said, "You don't believe me? I'll do it myself."
No.
1,000%. So back in 1975, Woodman recruited a buddy of his, this guy named Julian Knott, Dr. Julian Knott, and they actually created a hot air balloon using materials and techniques that would have been readily available to the Nazca at the time that these were created.
That's perfect.
And you know what happened?
What?
He went up in a balloon.
Yes.
And he actually completed a air balloon ride, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
Now
Yes.
it wasn't perfection, so it kind of veered off course, and then of course they had to kind of crash land, but everybody survived.
Yeah.
And super duper technically, they were able to actually make a DIY hot air balloon.
That's amazing.
And in case you're wondering, they went up about 300 feet, and they traveled through. I know. How would you feel, by the way, in a rickety
homemade textile hot air balloon?
Yeah, I wouldn't go up in one like that's professional.
No,
with
never.
bungee cords and everything, like nothing. This thing was like straight up DIY, like I said, and they did it. And he's still all in on this, man.
I love that for every reason. It's possible. It's probable. He proved it can be done.
You can't rule it out entirely.
No, you can't.
What would be, I suppose, complicated, because as I was like talking about this out loud, the first thing that dawned on me was like, what would communication be like from trying to... Yeah.
What?
You're 500 feet off the ground. What? So perhaps some logistical challenges there
Perhaps.
to do this. But anyways, I liked that. And now in terms of like just other theories, as I said, more or less basically disagreements amongst the most researchers about the actual purpose, but like they mainly fall into the major different categories. One being that it's just straight up art.
Yeah.
It's just art. It looks beautiful. You can't see it from the ground, but we know somebody or something out there is enjoying it. Maybe it could be an offering to the gods, let's just say.
Yep.
Another theory is that they're for worship. So perhaps the designs are meant to be seen from deities from above, and that makes total sense to me. Another theory is that the lines point to various seasonal changes, like I gave the example of the solstice earlier. And then another one is that it basically points to different water sources. So if you follow it at some of these lines, at some point you'll hit the ocean.
Okay.
Which is like, okay, you're not going to drink seawater, but anyways, you find the ocean.
Sure.
And perhaps maybe, like I said, ancient artesian wells or something to that effect. But probably not. Probably not a lot more than that. But let's talk about our last academic here, Dr. Joe Nickell.
Okay.
He's a former professional stage magician and private investigator.
It's my two favorite professions.
Who now teaches at the University of Kentucky.
Of course he does.
He teaches writing specifically. So a sentence I never thought I'd ever craft. Anyways, so he just straight up admits he doesn't have a theory about why these lines were made, but instead he sets out to debunk the fact that they could or had to be made by ancient technology, or that they could or couldn't be made that way. And he said instead, he's like, look, anybody can do this. So he actually set out to recreate the largest and the most intricate figures on his own.
Okay.
He recruited two of his cousins, his dad, and his 12-year-old nephew, and attempted to recreate the condor.
That one is amazing.
It's the most intricate one. It really actually is. And this is where I'm quoting here. He said, the method we chose was quite simple. We would establish a center line and locate points on the drawing by plotting out their coordinates. So that is, on the small drawing, we could measure along the center line from one end, the bird's beak, to a point on the line directly opposite the point to be plotted like a wingtip. Then we would measure the distance from the center line to the desired point, a given number of units of the small drawing. We would require the same number of units, larger units, of course, on the large drawing. And for measuring on the ground, we prepared ropes marked off with paint into the Nazca feet, with a knot tied on each 10-foot interval for a total length of 100 units. And to aid in the accuracy of the plotting of the ground, we decided to employ a T made from two slender strips of wood. With this, we could ensure that each measurement made from the center line would be at approximate right angles. And after 2 days of just DIY making Nazca lines, like in the desert, near the Nazca lines, they went up in the air with an aviation expert, a pilot.
Yeah.
Looked down.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Okay.
So they were able to actually totally 100% accurately recreate these lines.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I mean, to me, that pretty much disproves Erich von Danaken. I mean,
I'm sorry, what?
He's such a goof.
Such a yeah, that's a nice way to say it. I'm surprised he's not canceled yet. I keep waiting to see that on
Is
Twitter.
he not dead?
He's still alive.
Wow.
He actually just wrote another book about the Nazca Lines too.
Oh.
Yeah,
Let's
or
get
at least
him on, man.
Revisited them. He probably wouldn't come on the show.
No, he definitely would not come on the show. Okay, well, that is fascinating. That, first of all, a group of people decided that they wanted to do it, set out and did it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like, boom, people did it. Wasn't necessarily aliens. Second of all, the idea that you could not see it from, that the people at the time could not see it because they lacked aviation skills. Also disproved because that one guy, he decided to go up and make a homemade hot air balloon, and whoo, man, talk about a fun Saturday afternoon. Anyway, so theoretically, they could have also seen these if they wanted to. Potentially, maybe.
Interesting point. They're not all mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They can all work together in some way.
So if those two are true, the only question left is why. And I guess theoretically, you could always say, why create art? Why do anything? Because it's there, because it's beautiful, because I want to, man.
That's right.
Back off.
That's right. Why start a podcast, right?
Yeah, really. Remind me again.
So you're going to say, where would you come down in terms of like what you really actually believe versus what you probably don't?
I truly believe this was man-made.
Yep.
I probably tend to believe it was more some sort of celestial map or even a navigational map.
True.
But I really wanted to get to the aliens, man. I wanted that to be the predominant theory that I came away with on this, and I'm kind of disappointed.
Well, give it another 1,000 years, and maybe we'll have found out that in fact it was aliens.
How about you? I mean, you spent more time with this. What are your thoughts?
All I can say is seeing the websites where some of the other theories were listed. I got to fall back on. Yeah, probably either art or ritualistic, or perhaps, like you said, maybe some way to plot out like constellations, or the seasonal changes, that type of a thing. So yeah.
Shoot. I just feel disappointed. I feel let down. Why do I feel let down?
Because you wanted it to be aliens.
I desperately wanted it to be aliens. All right, guys. Well, next week we'll do aliens. How's that sound? I don't know.
Ha!
Maybe.
Probably.
Chances are likely. All right. Hey, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening all the way to the end. If you haven't, it would mean a great deal to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast.
Smash that like button.
Do whatever he just said. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local hot air balloonist about our podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.